Welcome to Saturday's Warrior, where we talk BYU, Big 12, and obviously conference realignment. Lately, we've been doing a series called the ACC Spotlight, where we go around the conference talking to other YouTubers and podcasters from each of the fan bases to get their take on realignment and the future of the ACC. Today, we have Evan from the Red and White podcast to discuss the NC State perspective on this whole mess we call realignment. So welcome, Evan.
Appreciate it, Trevor. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited to jump in today and kind of dig into this. But before we do and really get started here, if you're interested in realignment and like getting lots of different viewpoints, please like this video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any of our installments of this series. Additionally, we have guests from across the College Huddle joining us. The College Huddle is the largest independent college sports community online. But there are a few schools we don't currently have represented in the College Huddle. And so if you are a fan of one of those schools and would like to see us do a spotlight on your school, and we haven't done it yet, let us know who some of your favorite podcasters are. Feel free to go down in the comments, let us know. And better yet, go tell them that you'd like to see them join us here on the show. All right. So, Evan, before we jump into NC State and ACC specifically, I just want to get, first of all, your view and take on the college athletic landscape and all that's happening with realignment and the current state of affairs with everything. There's been so much change over the last couple of years. And it feels like it's changing daily at this point.
Yeah, it's a big question. And you want to keep me to 30 minutes. I can ramble for about 2 hours on how much I hate the whole landscape changing right now. I mean, to me, it's disingenuous to college athletics and the heart of what college athletics is supposed to be. It's supposed to be regional, right? We're supposed to have regional rivalries. We're supposed to, be able to go into the office, have water cooler talk about playing, NC State and Carolina or NC State and Clemson and whatever, any other regional rivalries. And right now it's all being decimated for, the good of, the good of nobody, all by the TV networks, right? I mean, we're just beholden to them because of, the lack of foresight from anybody in this situation over the long term. Right? There's very few people who have gotten a grips on it. SEC and Big Ten kind of saw it coming, and they have been, protecting themselves, but they're destroying the game. And it's inevitable at this point that it's all going to implode, in my opinion. I think at some point everybody's going to get sucked into one of the 2 or 3 conferences, and then they're going to break out into their own pods, and we'll be back where we started. All right. That's at least what I'm hoping for, because nobody wants to see, Washington in the Big Ten traveling to play Minnesota. Who really cares about that? Right. You see the Pac-12 getting decimated for what? Again, TV revenue for a few people making a lot of money. I mean, these schools are already making boatloads of money, and they're just so inefficiently run. They're just begging TV networks to give them more money, right? Rather than actually fixing the problem, they're like, let's just throw more at it. And it stinks, man. I don't like it. I'm not sure anybody else does like it. And it's hurting all of college athletics, just not just college football. So that's my short answer.
No, I'm with you. And it's crazy because you see, I don't know, on Twitter or in comments of videos and whatnot, you see people that are fan bases of, schools that are in one of these quote unquote 2 power, major conferences now, and they're almost, cocky about it. They're proud that, oh yeah, we're in like one of the best conferences. I was like, to what end? I mean, look what you're doing to the sport. Why? Like I liked it when there were several all pretty equal conferences. And granted, BYU hasn't even been in a power conference for very long, but I, despite that, I liked having the parity, and, any given year you could see, great teams that emerge from any one of the conferences. And so I don't know why they're excited about that, other than, they get to say, yeah, they're on top. But yeah, it is disappointing. You see rivalries torn apart, and then these conferences that really make very little geographic sense at this point. So, and you mentioned too the power grab for money, and they're just going for it. And granted, the rules and the system in place kind of incentivize them to do that. But then again, the SEC and the Big Ten are the two that are shaping and influencing what the system looks like to incentivize them to do it. So it's just this, no matter how you look at it, they're creating this system to further incentivize them to push further and further and just continue to, I guess, destroy what college football has been for so many years in athletics.
Yeah, you're exactly right, man. It's and only a few people are getting rich off of it, which is the crazy part. Like the fans out there who are thumping their chest about, hey, yeah, we're in one of these conferences now. We're gonna, we're making all this money. I mean, I don't get it, because you're not getting any more of that money. Your school's getting that money, and they're just going to spend it in some ludicrous way, right? I mean, it's everything to avoid paying the players, which is probably a whole nother topic. But that's where this is all leading at some point. I don't know who's gonna step up and actually say, hey, look, we need to figure out this, for the good of the game, for the good of all college athletics. But right now, it feels rudderless, and it feels like a money grab from the SEC and Big Ten, and it's just super annoying.
Yeah, and I'm all for, players not being taken advantage of and getting compensated fairly and everything. But the system we have, I mean, with no rules, and then you're also to the point where we're stripping away a lot of what made college athletics special and made it separate from the pros, because obviously the talent level isn't as good. I mean, you take the best from the college ranks and they advance on to the pros. And so we know that overall the talent isn't as good, but there's something else that's special. And if you continue to strip that away and just make this a minor league, then it's something entirely different. And it's not what we signed up for, so to speak.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
Okay, well, now that we've complained long enough, so let's get into NC State and the ACC, because there's a lot going on, a lot of confusion, a lot of rumors swirling around, and but I want to get a better sense of NC State's perspective on this, because you were considered part of this Magnificent Seven, these 7 schools from the ACC last year that were kind of dubbed together, that it looked like there may have had interest in maybe breaking the conference up or doing something, right? But then come sometime later, NC State and UNC break on the addition of the new schools, the Stanford, Cal, SMU. And so I'm trying to look at this and figure out what is NC State's perspective on realignment and trying to keep the conference together, and what's their agenda and what are they trying to achieve here? And I know that was a lot in one question, so I'll let you unpack that.
Well, first of all, the whole idea of the Magnificent Seven should have been a red flag when the Big Ten approached the Pac-12, the ACC, and the Big 12 at one point. Was like, yeah, we're all in this together against the SEC, and then like 2 days later, just said, F you, we're taking USC and UCLA, and it just started this whole thing to crumble, right? They had a handshake agreement. This is the same kind of nonsense. They had some handshake agreement where, we were going to hold strong. We didn't want to do this. Somebody, I don't know what happened. I don't know why it flipped. I've reached out to our chancellor's office, and they basically said, talk to the ACC. And then later on, it's like, well, it's for us to know, and it's our business, right? Mind your own business. It's like it got the brush off was like, holy crap, I can't believe you guys are, this is your stance right now, and this is what you're telling your fans, and it got no play and it didn't run anywhere. I'm like, how is everybody else ignoring this? And I wish I had the quote handy, but it was basically like, that's our business. You're a petty fan, you don't get to have a say on this. I'm like, holy crap. And then, very next day they come back begging for money. Like, hey, give us some more money, donate. You're like, man, what the hell? And anyway, so the whole Magnificent Seven thing, I think it was a joke. I think everybody knew it was going to be a joke. Why NC State flipped, there's been rumors of money exchanging hands. I don't know if it's that simple. I don't think people are smart enough to keep those kind of conspiracies quiet. So I don't know what the realistic take on that one is, but that came from somebody outside the ACC, which I think is interesting. But there's also rumors of NC State trying to get, now it slips my mind, the academic qualifications that Cal and Stanford and SMU, or Cal and Stanford have. Yeah, there you go. Right. Trying to get the AAU qualifications and needing the extra votes and like a little glad handing there. Hey, we'll vote for you here if you help me out there later on. It all stinks, man. Nothing makes sense. None of it makes sense. Right. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if we'll ever find out what happened, but it was disappointing from the NC State fan base that they broke down and said, yeah, let's vote. Let's add Cal, Stanford, and SMU to the ACC. Like, that just makes zero sense. When if they should have, I wrote about this years ago, and I put this out there, and I tweet it out all the time. If they were being proactive, they should have done this ahead of time, right? This is a very reactive measure, and there's been nobody leading the ACC in particular that has been acting proactively. And they should have gone out to the Pac-12. Hey, let's do something, right? You guys are struggling. You don't have a TV deal. Your TV deal's coming up. Nobody wants to renew with you. You're not going to get paid the same. Let's form the Coastal Conference, right? You have one side and two sides, and do something like that drastic which would force the ACC to be able to renegotiate their TV deal. You're adding a whole bunch of Pac-12 brands. You're saving the Pac-12. You can allow them to play regionally, and you're being proactive, and you have some foresight of the inevitability that the SEC and Big Ten are going to try to grow. They're going to try to poach teams. But if you had have done something like that, then we wouldn't be in this place right now. The ACC would have been the protagonist in this situation. But I don't think anybody in the Southeast believes in the ACC leadership. Right? They have given us nothing to build our confidence in them. All the way back to John Swafford, even Jim Phillips, new guy. You're just like, what are you guys actually doing? How are you trying to help the league and help the league stick around and be here for the long term? And it's just, we're working on some things and just some generic coach speak crap that you get from them. And it's just like, they're all just cashing checks, man. That's what it comes down to. Everybody else is cashing checks, and they're just scratching each other's backs on how they can cash more checks. And just like the fans and everybody else, just like, whatever, you're going to deal with it. You're going to keep donating your money because you love your school, and it just drives me crazy. Yes.
So you made it very clear how you feel about the additions of these other schools in no uncertain terms. And honestly, I think most ACC fans and even non-ACC fans are not necessarily enthralled by that, by those additions. It makes, like you said, no sense. But if at the end of the day, it ends up paying off and the ACC is able to stay together, maintain most of its teams, even if a couple leave, do you think that will have been worth it?
I guess, but I don't think that's what's going to happen. Honestly, if NC State was smart, or not the NC State, if ACC was smart, they would have pressured Notre Dame when the pandemic hit and Notre Dame was scrambling to find people to play. And instead, the ACC just rolled over, took it in the ass from them, and was like, hey, do what you want, take advantage of us, just don't leave us. Like, what? Why would you do that? And again, no leadership, no forward thinking. So, if it does help the ACC stick around somehow, I don't know how it does, then I guess it's fine. I think it was such a reactive move. I'm just not a fan.
Yeah, I did feel very reactive. But the reason why I asked, and the one, I guess, argument you can make for it is I look around at, okay, look at these conferences that refuse to add other schools when they need to. Like the Big 12 refused to do it. And guess what? Texas and OU left anyway. And then they were left scrambling. The Pac-12, they didn't want to add other schools and they held out. And then USC and UCLA left anyway, and then they were left scrambling. And so in some ways it's like, okay, it doesn't make any sense, but on the other hand, maybe it'll pay off. I mean, these other conferences tried to do it the other way and tried to listen to these bigger brands and said, you know what, we're not going to add because they don't want them, and then ended up still biting them. So,
well, the difference there is their TV deals are what boned them, right? They couldn't get a better deal. And again, the people in power chasing money, right? If there was real leadership, then they wouldn't have done it. The ACC's got it's a pretty locked in deal through 2036, and for somebody to leave would take I mean, minor miracle, I think. So I think the situations are a little bit different there. I mean, the deal is such a long-term deal, which is good in itself as it kept the league around, but it's bad because you're falling behind in terms of revenue when you do end up having to pay the players, and you have to, and you have less money to go around. But it's tough. I don't think the situations are the same for that reason.
No, that's a good point. Ultimately, that's why the Big 12, didn't want to, because they felt like there were more mouths to feed, and you weren't really getting. You could still have the conference championship because the rule was changed to allow them to hold a conference championship with only 10 schools instead of 12. So great point, and also perfect segue into my next question, which is asking about the lawsuit. So I'm not asking you to break it down, but we know that Florida State and Clemson are in the thick of it with the ACC. UNC's been rumored a little bit to possibly be getting involved or have their own suit or not. I've heard different things at different times. Do you see NC State ever being involved with that in any way, or are they doing their best to, or are they just kind of sitting by waiting to see what happens, or are they trying to keep the conference together? Like, what is their stance on all this?
So this is a very pessimistic view of NC State's leadership, but over the last 30 years, 40 years, we have never been proactive in terms of sticking up for ourselves. They are so scared of the NCAA or ruffling any feathers, like historically. And then I have hundreds of instances of this, right, to back this up, right? So it's not just some egregious claim. NC State fans who are listening will know that, they'll be nodding along. Like, yeah, I agree. I just think we have never been one to push the envelope. So I don't think they will ever join the lawsuits. I know Carolina is, I don't know if they have or they're threatening to. State's going to ride the coattails of Carolina. Whatever's going to happen. Like, that is pretty well known around here that the Board of Governors is not going to let UNC leave and leave NC State behind. It's the largest state institutional school. Right, it would be very bad politically for them if one left and they left NC State and the ACC, right? And I think the board is very NC State heavy right now, so they will be taken care of, and I think NC State is banking on that. I don't think they're going to ever come out and buck the trend and try to, stick their nose out and say, hey, we're in this, right? They're just going to follow along just because that's what we do.
So at this point, there's many people, especially if they're Florida State fans, are convinced that they will be out of the ACC by the end of June, or at least by the end of August, right? And so at this point, I'm not willing to quite get to that point, although nothing at this point would surprise me in realignment. But it does seem like Florida State is doing everything possible to get out of there. Clemson has been playing a little bit nicer, but still seems like the writing's on the wall for them as well. So what do you expect to be the outcome of this? Like, do you foresee a scenario in which they, depending on the rulings, they still can't get out, or have they burned all their bridges? And would you even want them to still be in the conference at that point? Or would you just rather figure something out and let them go and kind of move forward?
Well, I'm kind of with you. Nothing would surprise me. I'm going to say no, they're not going to get out of it by June. I just don't think that's realistic. But again, we've seen crazier things being overturned by the courts. And it wouldn't surprise me if somebody jumped in with, the money to back Florida State. But at the same time, I don't understand the move, right? If you're Florida State or Clemson and you're trying to get to the SEC, they don't want you, right? It's been known that they don't want either one of them because they already have those markets. They already have teams there. You know, Florida's not going to let Florida State jump in, and South Carolina's not going to let Clemson jump in. There's no real benefit to them to do it. You're just making your path to the playoff harder. You know, if they were smart, they would have, you know, pushed the 12-team playoff long ago, right? And make your path to the playoff a lot easier, right? Florida State leaving to go to the SEC would just, they're not going 13-0 in the SEC, right? And I know they got left out of the playoff this year, whatever. Your path is a lot harder there. So what other than money makes you want to leave? And again, who's seeing that money? It's the administration. It's the school. You're right. The fans, the players, they're not seeing that money, not in the current setup. So I don't understand their desire to want to get out so bad. It just, to me, it just doesn't make any sense. I don't get it. And so I don't expect them to get out, but at the same time, nothing's going to surprise me. The whole situation has been so weird. And all it takes is one judge to interpret something a little bit differently than others and, you know, blow the whole thing up. But it just seems like a dumb move at this point, other than, you know, the university chasing checks.
Well, yes, absolutely. Everyone's chasing the almighty dollar at this point, and whether, you know, anything else makes sense along the way, you know, it doesn't matter, because, you know, it's the paycheck is
right,
so drastic, the increase, you know. And they think, although I question that too, because I feel like I wonder if even if Florida State gets into, let's say, the Big Ten. I mean, the Big Ten's shown that they're taking schools at a discounted rate at this point. So does Florida State think they're getting a full rate? Otherwise, because if it's discounted, it's going to be more similar to what they're making now in the ACC. So it's not closing that gap. All it does is really get you into that, you know, the in club for the meantime, until the next TV deal. So
I don't know if you saw the breakdown of what they're calling the Calimony, which I think is funny, where UCLA has to pay Cal in order to leave. And if you do all the math, it nets out to like UCLA making $5 million more than they were before. Like, you're doing all this work, you're blowing all this stuff up, and you're going to get $5 million more. Seems crazy to me. And I think Florida State's situation would be very, very similar with the amount of money they'd have to pay the ACC if they left. And I don't hold any qualms with Florida State. They want to leave, go ahead. I think it's dumb, but you know, that's their choice. I think they're just making them harder for themselves.
Yeah. So, okay, let's assume now that lawsuits go through, whatever, teams get out and are going elsewhere. You've already mentioned that NC State and UNC are very tightly tied together. Now, in Virginia, there's something similar, but it sounds like UVA and Virginia Tech would probably have an easier path towards going their separate ways. So let's say Florida State, Clemson leave, whatever. UNC, you know, they get an invite somewhere else, they want to go. I don't know if I see either the SEC or NC State. I think both of them would want to get into North Carolina, and I can see UNC as being a top level target for a lot of conferences. But I don't know if I see them really wanting to take two schools in North Carolina as a package deal.
Correct. I don't think that would happen. What would happen was Carolina would go to the Big 12. I mean, not the Big 12, the Big 10, and NC State would go to the other one, right? I think it's almost inevitable. They would not be going to the same conference, but they would also not be left out of the whole deal. At the very least, NC State ends up in the Big 12, is from by all accounts. But I think it would be Carolina to the Big 10 and State to the SEC, which would be something. Would be crazy.
Right. So, and that's something I've talked about too. So what if, I mean, is that really the only way you could see them becoming decoupled, is if they both had a home in one or the other of the Big 10 and the SEC? Like, is there any other way? Like Big 10, or like, let's say UNC is like, hey, we're going to the Big 10. SEC says, no, thank you, NC State. And the Big 12 says, we'll take you. Is that, and I mean, you still,
I think that's viable. Yeah. I think that's 100% viable. Yeah.
And so, because that really is, I think, NC State's floor is the Big 12, unlike other
Correct.
schools like Duke. Like, I don't know if I see them make it to one of the majors, possibly could make it to the Big 12, but their floor is like, I've seen some people throw out Ivy League, which isn't happening, but a lot of other crazy scenarios, which none of which are very desirable. But NC State, I mean, really, if the worst case scenario, if the ACC falls apart and it's not able to stay together, is the Big 12.
Right.
I don't see any way why the Big 12 wouldn't want NC State. So if that does become the case, how would you feel about being in the Big 12 now, a rebuilt one? Let's say there's a few other schools. Let's say there's Virginia Tech or whoever else, Louisville.
That's fine. I think it's more fitting for our program. I think program level, I think it fits in the Big 12. I think there's there's a lot of good programs. There's not the elites, right? In terms of football, at least. It would be the undoubtedly best basketball conference, probably the best baseball conference. There's a lot of positives to it. I don't have any qualms with it. I mean, it would be fun. I think it would be fitting. It would be weird, but whatever, it is what it is. What I would see happening is the Wakes, the Boston Colleges, the Dukes would form a Big East type basketball only conference at some point. I mean, I just think that's almost inevitable. It would be very strange, but really, none of those schools move the needle for football, right? Duke, if anybody wants Duke, it's for the basketball brand. And even then,
Right.
without Coach K, how long is that brand going to be sustainable? I think it's a very real question to ask. So, yeah, I mean, ACC did itself disservice a long time ago, expanding out, by adding small private schools. You added Syracuse, you added Boston College, you added, Wake, Duke already. Miami's a small school. I know they have a brand, but they haven't held up their end of the deal. So, I could see those schools all getting parsed off into something else. It would be interesting. That's kind of my wild prediction, but we'll see. I don't know if anybody can really predict that accurately at all outside of like 4 people.
No, and even that, yeah, I don't know if anyone can. I think there's obviously people that are more in the know, but I think there's too many variables at this point. Okay, so because I could say as a Big 12 fan, and I'm on the East Coast, so I'd love having Raleigh's not so far from me. They'll give me a chance to see a few more BYU games each year. But in terms of the conference and the health of it, yeah, I think NC State would fit in, and they bring a lot of value and could be, competitive. I mean, and that's the thing. The whole conference is pretty competitive from top to bottom. We have our teams that are down, but not quite like maybe even some of the power conferences with, I hate calling them the power conferences because they're still power 4, but the Big 10 or the SEC, that really have some bottom feeders. So we have that, and we can, and I think NC State would bolster that further. But let's say that a couple schools do leave and the ACC, they're still together. NC State is still there with UNC. The bulk of the conference is still there. What would you like to see the conference do? Would you like it to stay pat without maybe the Florida State and Clemson, or would you rather see them go and still pick up a couple other schools, maybe more regional, whatever, to continue to strengthen the conference?
I don't think there's any strength in the conference, to be honest. I don't think anybody regionally is going to have that impact that would hold it all together, right? I mean, I've heard like pick up UConn or pick up East Carolina. Like, no, I don't want any of those. In App State, trying to throw out legislation that we have to play them. No, that's just dumb. I don't think anything out there is going to work, right? If those 2 schools leave, then I think it's all. You better throw all of your lifelines out and try to figure out where you're going to end up, because the ACC won't be the ACC after that. Like, even adding Cal and Stanford, like it's not going to be there. And yeah, I think it would get really ugly. I think you'd see Carolina leave successfully, Virginia Tech leave successfully, NC State leave successfully, and then after that, I don't know where anybody else would go. Like Louisville, who, is kind of a decent brand, but they're kind of in between. right? They came from the Big East, and the Big Ten doesn't want them. The SEC doesn't want them, you know. So I don't know where they might end up in the Big 12. They might have a place to land, but outside of that, I think if I'm Wake, if I'm Duke, if I'm Boston College, I'm really scared, right? I'm really petrified that if the Florida State and Clemson win this lawsuit, that it just comes crumbling down. So I don't know if there's anybody you can replace them with that would, hold things together. Maybe monetarily, temporarily, but I think in the end, it busts. Yeah.
Yeah. No USF or Memphis or Tulane or none of those move the needle for you?
I mean, they can stick for Conference USA and whatever other Sun Belt Conference type deal they're going to have. I don't think NC State would get left in like Oregon State did. Right, Oregon State just got absolutely hosed. Now it's just in Oregon, and I would poke a few Oregon State fans just to see how they're just crushed. Right, it's just devastated, and their programs have been doing all right. They made the NCAA tournament. The football team has been pretty good under Jonathan Smith, and then all of a sudden, bam, done. Right now, you're playing in the Mountain West. You're playing San Diego State. I don't think NC State ends up in that situation, but I can see quite a few other ACC schools there.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked about probably a floor for NC State. What do you think the percent likelihood is of ending up in any of these conferences, staying in the ACC, going to the SEC, Big 10, Big 12, or other? Between those, how would you break down where you think the likelihood of where you end up is?
What's your timeline? 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? Next year?
No, let's say yeah, that's a good question. I guess whenever this next wave of realignment goes through, I would say for maybe the next 5 years or so.
I would say in the next 5 to 10 years, 5 years probably realistic, ACC won't be around. And I think that means NC State is either in the SEC or the Big 12. I don't think there's any in between there. Again, like I said, I don't think the lawsuit's going to come through, but there is if I'm remembering correctly, there's a reevaluation period with the ACC TV contract in 2030 or something around there, 2028 or some weird number, right? So within the next 5 to 7 years, I could see them come and say, well, you're not so much valuable to us anymore. And then it explodes, or some variant of that. I just don't see any positive. I just don't see any way they get out of this alive. So I would say in the next 5 to 7 years, NC State's playing in the Big 12 or the SEC. And I feel pretty confident about that, oddly enough.
I didn't have this, but just thinking about it. So let's say you do end up in the SEC. I mean, what does that look like for you? Because that's obviously, going to be a slog.
Brutal.
Yeah.
Brutal. I mean, good, again, for the money. If you're getting those checks, it's not helping me. I'm not getting those checks. Maybe you get more money to pay players by that time. You should probably be paying players. I think it looks a lot like Mississippi State does, where you're fighting to be 500 every year. I think NC State's got potential. The program's been doing better over the years, but I don't think you're not going to get to the top level SEC, right? I mean, if you're looking at Georgia's, Bama's, you might be able to flirt with an Ole Miss style, right, where you get 8 to 10 wins every year, that kind of deal. Maybe if you're lucky, with a lot. The plus side to it is that if there's only right now in North Carolina, there's a lot of players, right? It's one of the top 5 most productive states in terms of football talent. If Carolina and NC State are the last 2 Power 3 schools left remaining, you might be dividing up the talent only among those 2. As right now, you're dividing it among Wake, Duke, even App, Clemson, South Carolina, East Carolina. All right, it's something I always said. If NC State was like Nebraska, where there's only one school in the state, right, you'd have a lot of talent and you would be a lot better program. But that's not the case. But if it does come down to it, then, and I hadn't thought about this before until you asked me that question, I could see it being beneficial from a talent acquisition standpoint. I think there'd be less places for people to go. But again, you're not going to be top tier unless something crazy happens. So you'll be in somewhere in that, kind of where Florida is right now. I think Florida's obviously a better program. It's got more upside, but they haven't been able to win crap lately. But it's anywhere between Mississippi State and Ole Miss. I think that's kind of where you land. You're not going to be Vanderbilt. I don't think you'll be a bottom feeder. But again, you're going to be having to pull every punch in order to get to an Ole Miss level where they're, winning 10 a game.
Yeah, which is still a great football team, but not ultimately playing where, in the most, like for a conference championship or anything.
Yeah, I mean, your path to the playoff is just ridiculously harder. You'll be hoping for like pod championships or whatever they're going to break out into at some point. Right. Maybe we can get a division if there's like 6 divisions. Like that's what you're going to be fighting for. But even then, every division is going to have an Oklahoma or a Bama or a Georgia or somebody in there. You're like, damn, I got to play one of these schools again. We've had NC State's had that for the last 20 years. Like Florida State was great in the early 2000s, right? And then Clemson started getting good. And like we've been third pretty much every year for the longest time. And just getting over that hump has been just a huge obstacle to us. And then if you have to go to the SEC and you have to do that hump again, man, it's going to be a slog. But I don't know.
Yeah, it sure will.
Right
so,
yeah.
Yeah, well, we'll see how it all shakes out. All right. Well, Evan, thank you so much for joining me and all your insights. I appreciate it. Where can everybody find you and all your content?
Yeah, of course, anytime. Red White Podcast on Twitter. redwhitenetwork.com is our website. Both those 2 places will lead you everywhere we need to go to find all our stuff.
All right, perfect. And I will include all that stuff in the comments down or in the description down below. And thanks for watching. Please be sure to go check out all of Evan's content, follow him, and be sure to like this video and subscribe as well. And we'll catch you next time. Go Cougs.